welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we delve into the world of Ty West's Pearl.
Yep, we look into an extraordinary origin story, as it's also subtitled. I like that little subtitle.
So the prequel to X, the Ty West film, which we have previously covered on this podcast.
We previously covered, and I mean, I was a massive fan of it, if I recall correctly. So
Me too.
Yeah. So if you haven't checked out our episode on X, which was a pretty fucking class episode, if I do say so myself, I'd recommend you go and check that out. We also mentioned in that I hadn't seen Pearl yet, but I think you already had.
Yes, when we did that episode, I went straight off and tried to find and watched Pearl in a legal manner.
Yeah.
Because it was taking forever at the time. Remember, it was ages for the release. What was it, like March the following year or something like that?
Yeah.
When it had already been released in America, not as huge a gap between X and Pearl.
Yeah.
Whereas for us in the UK, we got it. It was another year before Pearl had made it over.
Oh
to
yeah,
us.
at least
It was a mad, because I remember you were waiting it out to see it in the cinema, and then you still didn't get to see it in the cinema.
Something happened. I think what happened was, I believe that they made X and Pearl at the same time and didn't really tell anybody. And then they released X, and maybe like 2 or 3 months later, they released Pearl. However, like you said, in the UK, they released X in, I think it was something like May or August. And then they ended up having to wait until March the following year to actually release Pearl. So a lot of the momentum and a lot of the kind of the hype for it had died down significantly, to the point where I don't think they were actually showing it.
They didn't show. No, they didn't show it properly. It did go. Yeah, I don't think our local one showed it. And our local one does normally show most of, even like smaller films. It does normally show them at least for like a week or something like that.
Yeah, I think it might have had 3 days or something like that. Because I looked at it and I was like, I can't make it in these next ones. I'll go see it in during the week. And it had gone.
Part of what had come with the idea and the fun of Pearl also was the fact that, like, in America, X was released in March 2022.
Yeah.
Pearl came out in September 2022.
Oh wow!
So it was like, it was the same year. It was just a short gap between finding out, and like Pearl does really quite nicely inform on like the motivation for Pearl in X.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Because to you, she's kind of just an old lady. You don't really understand her. There's a lot of stuff you maybe don't quite get in X that you don't understand, which isn't to go against X, because it still works perfectly as a standalone, and it would have worked fine as a standalone. But after watching it, and I rewatched X again last night, because I was like, I hadn't watched it like Pearl and then X as a whole. So I wanted to kind of, I'd seen it the other way around. I'd seen X, then I watched Pearl, and then we talked about it on the podcast. And then I thought I'll revisit it what feels now like the natural way around, which is chronologically, so that I can see how Pearl leads into X and see some of the links maybe that we kind of might spot, or that and even if you haven't rewatched it, you'd still remember some of those things. Are like, oh, that was in X. And I think one of the best things I can say about Pearl is the fact, though, that it doesn't live solely as a film to be, nod and wink just to X. It doesn't live, because I think the hard thing here, and one of the questions I think when we talked about X was, so which one would we prefer, Pearl or X?
Yeah.
And now, I don't know about you, but like having watched them both, like when we had that conversation, is also the fact that these are two completely different films.
Very different films.
Different style, different manner. One is very horror. Yeah. One is not quite as it is horror, but in a very different way.
Well, one's almost very by the books, 70s influence slasher, and the other is like a 1950s character study. And one thing that I loved about X, and I am a big fan of Ty West and the films that I've seen of him, but he approaches his films with a very distinct vision when it comes to how they're going to be shot, what he's got to use, what they're going to be edited with.
Yeah.
And I found that straight away with the opening of Pearl, and apart from a few camera angles and certain shots that were a lot more modern, a lot of it was that kind of almost as if this film was originally shot in black and white, and then we're watching a version of it that's been released in, Technicolor, as the said. It kind of had that.
Well, it has that that early because remember the film, because it is like Wizard of Oz, Mary Poppins, where it comes up on the screen saying in Marvel, because when it was first Technicolor, the first amazing kind of. So I think that is a big. I could almost imagine if that's the way to it. This film would have actually totally worked if it was in black and white as well.
Yeah, of course.
It would have completely fit the tone of it to be like a 40s, 1950s style of like that. It would have worked fantastically. And I think that is another thing that separates it. There's the dark and grungy Texas Chainsaw Massacre style of 1970s in X, and this has the bright pop of like the dream. The American dream. Everything can be beautiful. Everything can be amazing. It can all be fantastic. And it's a thread that kind of runs through this film of that whole like anybody can achieve their American dream. Yeah. Whereas it's obviously we have Maxine in X, and that's a bit more of a grungy, darker kind of I'll do anything to get my dream. Yeah. Whereas this is more of the you can be Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, who goes off and does an adventure and be that dream, and you will achieve your dreams, and all you need to do is a tap of your heels and just believe it. With darker subtext around it, obviously, but it has a little bit of that kind of old charm of like that thought of it's all right because everything will work out. Yeah, and that's part of what makes Pearl as a character, is the idea that this is all going to work out in the end, though, right?
Yeah. She's kind of like just ruefully optimistic, and it is one of the things going in knowing where it leads. It's quite a tragic film, It is, yeah. Not only do we see that, Pearl's life is kind of, it's not what she wants at all. She's like the daughter of a German immigrant, kind of hiding out on this farm whilst her husband Howard, who obviously is the old man in X, is off serving in World War One. Her dad's kind of very is just infirm and is I think he's got
really disabled, isn't he?
Yeah, or something like that. But there's a couple of ironic lines in it. She's. At the start, she's kind of doing this kind of dance with nobody and she says to one of the cows farm life might be for you, but it ain't it ain't for me. Obviously, we know that she ends up spending her whole life on this farm. She also says one day the whole world is going to know my name, and it's ironic because after the events of X, everybody knows her name. She's going to be infamous. And it has this kind of theme throughout it that you're watching it all go wrong for her, and it's going to happen. It's just like, what's going to be the thing that pushes her over the edge? Where did all of this start?
And it is also nice that it is the case of there is something dark in her anyway. Yeah. So it's not just a case of something pushes her over the edge.
There's something
that you're waiting. There's something there, because from the very opening with the goose. Yeah. That kind of, the goose is there, and there's just something about her that draws her in, to just off it, which is just like okay. Yeah.
I love a pitchfork as a weapon in a horror movie as well, man.
Yeah, and it has that long, before we get to the actual title of Pearl, it has all of this long, this opening, the pitchfork, cool, and then her dragging it off by, and then we have our one of our other major first ones, which is the crocodile.
Yeah, I love the crocodile.
Down by the thing, throwing it to and then that's when we get Pearl in the big writing across the screen, and the music is all, again, the score's really beautiful. The score's
incredible. It's shot amazingly. The colour palette, it fits so well for that time period and those style of films. Which I've said before, Ty West is he's a very deliberate filmmaker. And a lot of it, there were a few shots, but a lot of it is relatively static. It's just like a beautiful shot that a lot of people reference is where she's riding her bike alongside the cornfield, and it's just a static camera that stays there as she kind of moves along.
Which, and again is very referential of the time when they didn't have the ability to do these big, amazing, like big windscreen, like moving along shot. Like it wasn't as available within the technology. They had a camera and they had to move it, but the most they could do was like a standard Steadicam, not like anything they've got today, where it's like they can whiz around you 360 and shit like that. And I think another an interesting part though is the fact that, like you said, Ty West is very like specific and tends to have like clearly thought out, which is interesting in a way because Pearl was created in the middle of X, not actually like it wasn't like always part of the clear vision. It was something that he made, which started out more as a for Mia Goth and Ty West, then being like, we kind of need to make sure, even though she is this elderly woman who's the killer, it needs to be very clear to you what is. So that was him being quite clear with Mia Goth and them kind of building a character together. So it's like, you've got Maxine, but you also need to clearly know what Pearl is. And the more that they developed it, the more they talked about it, the more it became this, this thing of like, this might actually be more than just a backstory for a character. This might be... And I believe COVID helped in that. Because then COVID came along and then they had to stop somewhat in production at the time.
And it might have given them time to flesh it out a bit more.
It gave them time to write, because obviously Mia Goth has writing credit on this film as well. So it's kind of partially hers that she got to delve into this character more, and she hit quite a lot. I think Ty West has kind of mentioned that quite a lot of the Pearl's kind of character motivation comes from her, that she kind of had a very clear image in her head of what she thought kind of would really destroy a woman. Kind of thing. What would break them down, for this very different kind of, because she's kind of a I don't know exactly what age she's meant to be. That's the hard thing, because she's so she's so like airheaded in a kind of like, she doesn't quite seem to understand the world properly. She's been so like bottled in that all she's seen is these outside little moments, and she believes that that's what she can be. That she's a very, you feel kind of sorry for her because she feels like a very vulnerable character, which is weird when she's not a vulnerable character. You know what I mean? She's quite an unhinged character. But the vulnerability that Mia Goth brings to her is kind of what I think breaks this beyond. This could have very easily been almost too slow, too out there. Another actress, I think, or a director and actress who hadn't thought through the character as clearly as they really have. This story could have been very kind of, I see what you're doing, but you're not really doing much with it here, because a lot of it really is, and this kind of the tricky part at times to talk about, because a lot of it really is in just studying Mia Goth's performance and the way that she's like bringing a kind of visual, like little facial aspects, little looking at her eyes when her eyes tear up, but not always in the scenes when you necessarily expect them to, or there's just this little like vulnerability throughout that runs that somewhat endears you to it and somewhat makes you repulsed by her at the same time. Like, how can you be that naive?
Performance,
and she has brought that to within the role. The only one that I will say one thing about this that I find quite weird between X and this, and I know it's intentional, but it kind of just throws me off a little bit. But I think because it's meant to be a reflection, but it's just so how close a reflection they are is Maxine into Pearl. Is the fact that it's the exact same voice, like the exact same. She's not changed her voice. You know what I mean? I almost expected Pearl to have a slightly different accent, but it's actually not. It's not the Pearl character. It's actually more because Maxine doesn't necessarily come from exactly the area they're in. It's more the fact that Maxine has that accent, not so much that Pearl has the accent. You see what I mean? Like, everyone else kind of matches what Pearl had and what she kind of had in the husband and the country and stuff like that, whereas none of the other actors in the rest of X have that same accent as Maxine, and she's meant to have gone away from that. And I get the fact that they are meant to be like a mirror image of each other.
So I think it's a deliberate choice,
And that same look, and that she's meant to be looking on a younger self. But I don't know why, there's just something that throws me off about the fact that they've both got almost identical accents. I just feel like Maxine shouldn't have had. I feel like the choice for Maxine to have the same accent, and then for Pearl to then have the exact same voice, it mirrors. But I don't know why. It's the only thing about the performance that just throws me off, because I feel like I might have found it even more impressive if Mia Goth was doing a completely different accent between the two, but you're still seeing that kind of reflection, if you see what I mean. And I understand why it's there. It's just a personal random thing of I like it when actors kind of, the one thing I find that really truly makes an actor is when they can change their voice. If they sound the same in every single freaking role, I think that's when it's kind of, you can see that there's not the range there. And that's not for Mia Goth, because she does do different accents in different films, but it is just in this one role. I don't know why, it just kind of threw me off that they sound so identical, that there was so odd to separate the character, but at the same time he doesn't want them to separate.
Yeah, because the kind of parallels, aren't they?
Yeah,
which is why definitely, I am very convinced that Maxine is going to be the killer in the next film.
Yeah,
because
that's what we're thinking. Yeah,
because her time will be over. And it's somebody else's chance in the limelight.
Yeah, I think we talked about the fact that we think that Maxie, that it feels very much like she's going into a world where she's basically just going to be used and abused, and they're going to take that whole the idea that she's come from this, and how X plays into that is the part I'm not really sure, is whether she uses that as stardom.
I think she will, definitely.
That's how she gets to stardom. But then she's then. Stardom. But I just feel like Maxine's going to have a very strong, maybe it's just with current times with Harvey Weinstein and stuff like that. I think we were both talking about how we feel like it's going to be part of the system uses and abuses her to the point of her becoming deranged.
Well, definitely. I think it will be that, because X is set kind of early 70s.
Yeah.
And Maxine, I believe, is supposed to be mid 80s. So by then, I think Maxine's fame and time in the limelight will be over, and she's effectively clawing for that back, and she's jealous of people who have what she doesn't have anymore, which is what Pearl was in X, and how, Pearl in this one is very much craving a better life. She's been raised on this farm, kind of told to keep to herself, because obviously the German immigrants, it's kind of the tail end of World War One. So she's kept isolated, half on purpose and half because she needs to be, because she needs to keep the farm going. And there's something that they often kind of reference in between both Pearl and her father, which is the canary in the cage, like the caged bird. And you see it throughout the film a lot of times, and I think it's symbolic of Maxine being kept on that farm and the life that she wants, and the constraints keeping her there, but also partly her father is kind of trapped in his body and watching all of this happen to his family.
It's the fact, the nice and terrifying part that actually comes into quite a lot of it is the fact that at first the father appears to be kind of a vegetable, and
for lack of a better
word, you know what I mean? That's the better, but it's kind of the way they treat it. But you slowly get more idea that he's actually far more aware, and then by the time it's almost as it goes on, you start to see that actually he really is reacting to a lot of these things,
because she's fucking physically abusing him.
That's what I mean. But they slowly kind of fizz out, because in the earlier scenes he's not really showing that much awareness. But as it goes on, it's like he's just been watching and slowly kind of realizing what's happening.
And you get this the start where she's feeding him, that kind of stuff, and then you just get bits and pieces as she almost gets more physically abused, as Pearl is kind of slowly starting to descend into madness, or her madness is increasing. You see her father kind of trying to react to it more, but he's limited because of his situation,
And then you have the mother, and I think the most interesting part is the fact that the mother could be looked at in quite a negative light in the way she acts, because she's so hard on Pearl. So in a lot of films, this would be the mother character that you hate, because she's so fucking hard on her. She's so, and a lot of people would put a lot of negativity onto that character.
Yeah.
And I can see where it is, because it's not like it's necessarily that she's like a likable character.
No, she's not. She's not very endearing.
No, she's not endearing at all. So you kind of understand why this need for love comes from Pearl, from her, without her father necessarily. And you feel like although Pearl is abusing her father, in some weird way she shows love for her father, and it seems like her dad may have been slightly more of the the one that gave her endearing love, whereas mother has always been more of the harder kind of or the one that's been with Pearl while father was off doing jobs and working. But it's also, when you look at it from a different perspective, I think, with the mother, of the fact of, one, she's got all of this stuff that she's got to look after and keep them safe and keep them, which you're more like, I understand why actually you're being so hard. The other thing is that I feel like she's not endearing because she sees something dark in her daughter. Yeah. I feel like there's something that she just doesn't love her daughter, but partially because she feels like there's something wrong with her daughter. Yeah. Like, that's the feeling that I got throughout, and I feel like when you look at it and you actually think about what Pearl does and how Pearl acts, you'd actually think that actually Pearl would be a somewhat hard, because she is at times, your mother's trying to keep you on this farm because she knows. She even seems like she's aware that she's somewhat abusing her father, like her husband, I mean, and and at times she kind of keeps an eye on her with with Pearl's father. Yeah. And again, she'll like, these are all things that like again, it's even more backstory that's like only hinted at, that you don't fully know, but it's like, she could have been a little fucking freak as a child, murdering animals on the farm long before she does it now. It's not something that's like brand new. It's not the first time she talks as if she's been doing this for a long time with animals. Yeah, and it's, I mean, there's also a lot of stuff that happens later on between Pearl and her mother when they do argue. Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact kind of quotes, but I do it. But yeah, there's a bit where Pearl kind of says that she wants to go and do this dance recital. We are jumping a bit. We fucking do that all the time. Yeah. And she says, I want to go and I want to try and have this this dance recital. And if I'm destined to be on the farm, then so be it. But I need to go. And she says, "Please, Mama, you have no idea what I'm capable of." And her mum says, "Oh yes, I do. I've seen the things you've done in private when you believe no one's watching. You think others won't notice. You can't keep your true self hidden forever, Pearl. They'll notice eventually, and they will be frightened, just as I am. Yeah. So as I said, it is right there, but it's one of those character things that I still feel like, because Pearl is the protagonist. Yeah. A lot of people kind of brush that stuff to the side and think, well, she's made a monster because she is that. But it's like, well, no, actually, quite a lot of these oddities, sometimes they do come from nature. Yeah. Sometimes they're nurture. Yeah. And it's hard to predict in those ways. But how do you deal? And it feels actually mother is protecting. Yeah, to the best that she can, in a way. Yeah, in the way that she's like, and also not quite treating her in the nicest way, but because she's like, well, you're a fucking murderer, you're a little freak, and for fuck's sake, we've got no money, and you keep killing our fucking chickens. Yeah, you kill our goose, our chicken, crocodiles, and then you feed them to the goddamn crocodile, and then you steal the crocodile's egg and squish it. Yeah, we could have raised that for meat, Yeah, and I do think, like, although it is right there in the dialogue. I think I felt like some of it was somewhat easy for some people to kind of gloss over or kind of miss it in their head. But when you look at that in perspective of some of the scenes that you see the mother walk in on or things like that, it makes it even more like she is so controlled when she could actually be way worse. Like, she could be way worse or way even more controlling when your daughter is that way. The fact that she, like, it's almost like, it's not like she completely balls her up. She turns her off to go and get things. Yeah. She could be like, don't you fucking, like, don't move. You stay down in that cellar. I'm going. Fritzl her. Yeah. Literally like, no, we can't let you anywhere off this farm. You're a little freak. But you mentioned about the nice shot with her going in, like, because that's one of the earlier parts is her kind of travelling into town, and where she first, like, we first get, like, after the dance, we get another kind of where she's getting some of this from, which is the movies. Yeah. Getting to see, which again, like, then, they were a rare thing, especially in like a small town like she's in, a rural kind of place, to have moved. These were like, this is like an amazing, incredible thing. Yeah. And it's something that's obviously like inspired her, and we get the projector, David Cornsweet, the future Superman. Yes. And he's, again, it's something where she's she talks about being loyal to her husband Howard, but also with a kind of disgust of the fact that he's gone.
Yeah,
kind of. But
she's very resentful.
Yeah.
He went,
She's a quite resentful person in general. Like anything that doesn't go her way is very much, and that stems. And then again in X, that's what we get. That's the main motivation we get from her half the time. Is just the fact that she's envious of what the young have got,
of what they had.
Yeah.
The chances that they never got. And another kind of parallel between Maxine and Pearl is, I mean, I don't know if it's the exact line. But in X, they keep mentioning, there's like one kind of religious quote that keeps coming up of like, you will be loved or something.
Yeah.
And it's, we find out that Maxine's dad is the preacher on TV. But both Maxine and Pearl came from kind of very repressed and very kind of smothering environments where, not only was it religious heavy, but it was, no sexual liberation, do as you're told, and you basically live your life in servitude almost, So then when we get to the projectionist and, she starts seeing these lives and these, these people, these girls going on tour, dancing and all of this kind of stuff, it lights a fire under Pearl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, I think, on a watch that it does. I think it is a case of these parallels work really nicely, and it does improve X more. Yeah. It makes X better, and it does make Pearl more interesting. Although I think they would both work perfectly fine as their own standalone pieces. And again, like I said before with Ty West, I think that's what's quite good, because lots of other things have tried to do these kind of prequels and stuff before, and they've ballsed up mainly because they've tried to make like a very, very similar film to the other film they made, just with it being, it just happened before. Like, you know what I mean? And this is trying to like really approach it from a different style completely. And yeah, there are those little parallels throughout. What she says about I deserve a better life than this, and they both say a lot of similar lines. They say about the one from the preacher where he says about you deserve you deserve that better life, which she says, Maxine says twice I think in X, and Pearl says basically that exact same line, which again is kind of hard to say, but it is from that religious context as well, which we don't really get the religious bit so much in Pearl. We don't get them going to church or any of those, but then everyone is somewhat kind of quarantining, which I think somewhat is from the actual real events that were going on when they came up with this story, and the fact that they were filming in the middle of a pandemic meant that they had to have a limited shots and stuff like that. Because they're interested, they did it during COVID, and they had it was some of the crew from Avatar 2 we used to help them do it in like New Zealand. They were filming at the same time, but they had to shut down part of their production, so they just said to those people, well, basically we're using the same sets, we don't have to rebuild any sets, we just need to make them look like newer, but apart from that, this is why it's like we're just basically using the same sets that we use except for one or two things, so if possible you come and support us to do this, and it's going to be a short shoot, we haven't got to do the same stuff we have to. And he just took advantage of the situation to be like, and it's a nice thing, because this probably would have then taken ages to get, if he had done it a different way, it would have taken ages to ever get there, or they would have just gone, we're not going to make that film because it's just not worth the effort of going to this extent, but because it's here now, we could literally do it, we could just start filming again right here,
and it might have been a very different film, because like you said, there's no church scene, there's no real sense of like community in it. It's a very much takes place on the farm or the 2 trips that she takes into town. And it's not got a massive cast list. You don't see Howard until the very end. You see the projectionist, you see her sister-in-law's mother, and then a very few side characters at the dance recital, and that's kind of it. It's a very small.
That's what I mean. And they are all quite contained little locations, so you can kind of see whether they were done like in a contained situation.
They might have done, if they'd have been able to do kind of as many people as they could without the COVID regulations, They might have had bigger scenes planned, maybe. Or,
which again, it's interesting to think about, because I think that would have worked. Possibly, like it could. I'm sure it still would have been good, but it might have worked against it, because I do think that's kind of what makes this better. Is it makes it feel even more like she's boxed in.
Yeah,
like she's closed off to the world. Like you only see very few characters. Even when the projectionist talks to her, it's like oh, someone else is trying to interact with me. This isn't usual, and that's where the kind of a bit of the fancy comes about, of like her being kind of lured by him, but also being like, but I have a husband, so I'm not gonna fully like embrace anything with you, but I have a husband. But it kind of makes those fantasies, which then leads to the scarecrow scene. Yeah, which is like a really odd scene. Yeah. Also, they may have made one of the creepiest looking scarecrows ever. That scarecrow looks scary, weird, because it looks like a human face. Yeah. You half keep it waiting, expecting its eyes to open, like it's going to come alive, or she's actually going to turn it into it. We have the shot where like you get the projectionist's face like appears on it. But it's just weird how they've made it look so much like a human face, like the eyes closed but human. Like I kept expecting the eyes to just open up.
But it was a weird scene, because she's dancing with it, and then she kisses it. Then she sees the projectionist, and she's like, she screams, "I'm married." And then she starts like dry humping it and tells it to be quiet. And it's that thing of like, we later find out why Pearl is so kind of attached to Howard. But there's just a need in her for love, and not only that, but a need to be desired and to give in to that repression. And then even when she's dry humping it, it's very strange, because she's like, obviously she's pretending to like have an orgasm, but the way when I was watching it, I was like, is she pretending to have, like, is she actually having an orgasm, or is she putting on a show, and is she performing? It never really makes it quite clear. It's very weird.
That's sure. I mean, I think she's dry humping to the point of I don't know, like someone dry humping a pillow or something like that. I'm thinking quite possibly, but that she actually is in her own head. But like you said about the keeping quiet as well, that's another part of repressing anyone else who's trying to like go over her. Like she's in control of something. Yeah. And she's not normally in control of very much in her life. Like she's controlled by others, or stuck by others, or others have made choices for her. Like again, like with the Howard thing, the idea that he's gone, but he made that choice to go, which then boxed her in. It controlled her life. It changed her life. She couldn't have anything more than that because of Howard in that way. And as you said, it's built on a little more later on, like those parts. But yeah, it is a really surreal kind of odd scene where it just shows how pent up she is, that she has to act out in almost these kind of childish ways. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's almost these ways that like when you're a teenager or something like that, and like a young, and you're like, I want to get these things out, but I need to keep them secret, and I need to hide them away from everyone, and I don't know what to do with this yet. I don't know how I do this, or what do I do going about this. Which all adds to that kind of childlike vulnerability that runs through her, that kind of makes her somewhat endearing. Like when most of the time you should be horrified by her. Yeah. And we also then when she gets back, obviously there's the lie with the mother about the money, like what happened about buying sweets when she was trying to pay to get into the project, like to watch the movie, and because I forgot about that. In the movie, she imagines herself, doesn't she, in the dance sequence with that. So there's a lot of these kind of, her brain is constantly just on being aware of being elsewhere. Yeah, everything is related to anywhere but where she is right now. She just wants to escape her reality completely. Yeah, and then we get the first time that her Howard's sister arrives. Yes, Mitzi, and they arrive with the pig. Yeah, which is a nice running thing that goes throughout. That's one of the few ones in my head that was very like, it reminded me of like that dinner in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when they're sat round and the food's all rotted on the table and they're all sat and rotted. Gross, man. And the way that 7 food. But it also is a nice kind of like that pig stays there obviously throughout the scene. Yeah. And it kind of shows the way that things are like, it's like a visual of breaking down. Yeah. Everything starts to break down, like Pearl's mentality from this point really starts to show, but then starts to break down more and more and more. And the pig, they keep going back to that shot of how much more it's decomposed and going. And I find that it's another thing that makes it feel like a film from the 50s is
the scene before that, she's praying by the bed, and she makes a wish that her life could be better. She's like, I want to chat. I can't remember exactly what she says, but she makes a wish, and then behind her we see the shooting star. Yeah. And it's very like 50s, very 50s style, fantasy
world.
You make a wish upon a star.
Yeah.
And then Mitzi comes, and she's like, sister-in-law stick together. There's a dance thing. They're taking one girl on on tour.
If you saw X and then you see Pearl, then you're straight away very concerned for Mitzi because she's blonde, and there's a blonde link. And it's one thing I remember when we watched X. I think you asked the question to me like, is there a link between? Is there more about why she hates? I can't remember what the character's name is. Brittany Snow's character in X. Is there I think you said something about. Is there like links? But you said, is there a link to like the blonde thing? And I was like, yeah.
Because what does she say? She definitely says something about her being blonde, doesn't she?
Yeah, she says to Howard when after she's pushed her in with the alligators in X, she says like, you know how I feel about blondes.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so that kind of part
reference
of it.
Mitzi.
And that kind of comes to her like a whole later, but this kind of somewhat explains why she's got a distaste for blondes in that way, because she sees Mitzi as this beautiful, glammed up,
everything that she's not.
Yeah.
She comes from. It's very clear that like Mitzi and Howard come from money, and they come from a well-off family where they have the opportunities to do this. Like Mitzi's mother's like, you can go and pursue dancing, and there is that kind of like jealousy between them. And that as soon as she's like, they're taking one girl around, the states to do it. You're like, you fucking know that it's gonna be Mitzi.
Yeah,
you're like, I know,
because she looks like that perfect all-American girl, doesn't she? That blonde girl, you know, that you're thinking of, and you're thinking and Pearl is exactly not. She's not that stunningly like glammed up, beautiful blonde that you constantly see, and a lot of like those again,
especially
50s,
of that time,
golden era, or even like later, you're Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Those kind of characters. So she's just not that, and you know that it's not going to work out for Pearl anyway. But it's kind of is that kind of like sad that you're looking at it and just like, this isn't going to go your way, and it's going to be humiliating for you to try and. But again, it is something she shares a bit with her mother as well, because her mother definitely has I don't want to. This is not the life that I would want to have.
Well,
and it has when Mitzi's mum goes to give her the pig. It's not a case of like they were directed, because they were just talking about food and the lack of it, and yet she completely rejects this meal that she's made for him, and she uses it as a we don't influenza and what's happened. We don't take those things without we don't take those things. But there's just a part of it that's more of a kind of like I don't need anything from you.
She literally says we don't need charity.
Yeah,
and then obviously
she hates that idea of being looked at as like as in she is the lesser one. The way Pearl feels about Mitzi is the same way the mother feels about this other mother. Like, you look down on us, don't you? I don't want to be looked down on.
Yeah,
like we are just as good as you.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I'd rather not. I'd rather eat nothing than eat your pig.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's the bit where
Bob's wife says to him.
That's what the wife says.
None of that hard pudding tonight.
Yeah, none of that. Then you get the scene where she goes back to the projectionist, and he shows her the porn. The old school porn where it's just a dude just like pumping.
Oh yeah.
And it's that thing of again, it's like the interest in the repression and seeing it, and later we know that like in X, Pearl is watching them have sex and make the porn film. And it's that kind of like interest in this life that she's not been allowed to go in. Voyeurism.
The look. It's the fact that she's also not like. Whereas others of the time, looking at it, he's shown it to them, and it's like the projector somewhat sees like in her like a day, or whether like he doesn't try anything on really. He's just like wants to show it, and it's her reaction. She's not like horrified or anything.
No, she's interested.
She's like, oh, like I want to see that, but there's part of it that's also like, I should be rejecting this and rejecting you, because we could be in a very situation here. Like I feel like you want. like something from me, and she's like rejecting that, even though she wants something like that. She wants someone to want her in that way.
And this is when she first mentions about dancing and her parents stopping her and the farm life stopping her, and she's just like, if they died, it would be the best thing. And he's like, what? You know? And because he's very into her, and then as he starts to see the nutter she is, he goes cold, but we get that scene, and then you get a scene that had me on the edge of my seat, is when she takes her dad out to the alligator. That's such a good scene. It's fucking I mean, I don't.
You are on the edge because you're just like feel like she's just gonna like, and it's something I don't know why, but it was something that popped into my head with that, like the fact that she's just gonna try and off the dad. And I don't know why, but I remember when I first watched it and thinking the alligator seemed like the easiest one because he just fell in.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you can tell she's on the verge of. And
she's on the verge of it.
Tense,
and her dad's just watching it. It's that thing of, it's the canary in the cage.
Yeah, and this is one, I think this is one of the first ones when you truly see his actual, you can see him properly reacting to something.
Yeah.
In other scenes he's a little bit, but not as much. But here, his eyes are fucking like...
Fucking as a fucking gator.
There's a gator coming. And she's there. And, because X had that fantastic suspenseful... The shot, like one of the most fantastic shots I think I've seen is, the gator slowly going behind Mia Goth in the water was amazing. But this one works just as well, but in a different context of like... Are you actually going to off your dad like that?
You know the terror's there,
and you don't, and I think you can feel it, and you can feel it in her brain that this would be an easy way to do it, but it's also because it's hard because it's not completely like, it doesn't definitely seem like she's there in her head, like that's I'm looking at this because it feels like it would have got to that point quicker. Yeah. So she's not there, but you can see just the point when her brain goes, "We're stood here, I could." Yeah. And then that's when Mum appears behind, and it's like. And you can see Mum just like is checking on her for that exact reason. She's like, where the fuck has she gone?
She's what's like, happening? I know what you fucking. I know what's going on.
The look on her face is I know, because their relationship gets even more tense after this scene. Yeah, and that's kind of what builds the boiling point with them, because it's like, I know what the fuck you were thinking. Yeah, I know what you were about to do.
And then because I think it's after that where you have it's like a storm, and that's when you get that. Incredible argument between Pearl and her mother, and it's very much this like repeating cycle where Pearl's mother had her life taken away from her, and by Pearl being born and her and her husband getting ill, and there's a line she says which is similar to like the man I married, I have to spend my days like changing and wiping up after the man I married. I'm supposed to be his wife, not his mother, you know? And you can just tell that like her mother is in the exact same situation where she doesn't like her life. She thinks that she deserves more, but her mother doesn't have a head full of stars and is just like, this is what I've got. I've got to deal with it.
Yeah, she lives in reality.
And she says, I'm making the best of it, you know?
Yeah, I think that it does help for that change, because whether it's something to do with the fact, I don't know if it's Ty West's exact choice, but what is it about a somewhat like Austrian German kind of accent that suddenly makes you feel a little bit colder towards someone? Yeah. And I think that adds to the mother of like, you don't feel a warmth from her anyway, but that adds another abrupt, like, sadly, apologies for anyone there, but it does add a somewhat stereotypical kind of feeling of a weird like coldness towards that character. So for a lot of the film I think you feel negative, and this scene does give you that little bit of an insight into Mum. And I think this film is more interesting the more if you look at it from, these two characters are so much more similar than they appear. And it's not just the overbearing mother that's created her. And I don't believe it is a nurturing thing that's totally made her into this. I think there is something naturally kind of off with her.
Wrong with her.
That Mum is not close to her daughter because she's terrified of her daughter in some way. She's terrified of what her daughter can do. And at the same time, there's the mother instinct to somewhat protect her. But and obviously this whole fight, and then the brawl, and then the fire, like, it's not even planned by Pearl. This
No,
isn't,
it just happens.
But the second that her mother is taken kind of somewhat out of the way, is the second that she is released in some way.
Is when she decides that like
I can get away with. I can do it. I can
Yeah.
just do it. I should just do it.
Yeah.
Because her mum obviously tries to stop her from doing the dance, and this is kind of a pusher when they get into a fight and over the father, and then she burns and like half of her body, and like didn't it like when it first burns it? I guess this is you forgetting how bad. It's quite obvious. It's quite a realistic thing because I don't know why, but movies make you think that someone setting on fire is just a case of like, their clothes are on fire and shit.
Yeah.
But you know, you put it out, so they'll be fine. When in reality, no. When your body gets even that much, like
that
partially
close
covered,
to it, yeah.
When fire is literally on your clothes and your skin pretty much melts pretty fucking fast.
Yeah, and then she throws boiling water on.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like fucking boil it, add to the burn, so
Yeah.
it makes it even worse. But you know, it is one of those things. I think a lot of films take you out of that because if you get like blockbuster films or Hollywood films, people get like, oh my god, they've been right next to a fire and they've survived, or they've got slightly, they were sat on fire, but it's okay, we put them out, they're fine. They're just a little bit singed, but they're walking away. When really it's like, no, your body needs third degree burn skin grafts, and you know what I mean, and you need. You know, your body is fucked, and that's what her mother is. Like half of her body is Harvey Two-Faced.
Yes, yeah, she's basically fucking Two-Faced.
Yeah, she has. And then obviously she doesn't do anything to help her. She throws her down in the cellar,
and she says something when she throws her in the cellar. She says like, "I'm free now," or something like that. You know, I can't remember exactly what it is.
And I think it is. Her mother was the one, and it's very easy. But you know, again, people put a negative connotation on the mother, like you do, because my first thought was, oh, she's a bit of a bitch, and she, you know what I mean, she's a bit overbearing. But you then don't realise that she was the thing holding everything together and holding this psychopath from getting away. You know, and the second her mother's gone, she just starts slowly dismantling her old life, taking all of it apart. Starts, again, continuing to, do things to her father. Generally just, go around. She off several more animals on the farm.
Yeah. I mean, she...
it's not quite clear the whole extent and things like that, but you have scenes like that. The one with the bird's eggs, the bait, where she's like, first she's like protects it, and then she's like, and this was slightly...
It's a gator's egg, I think.
Gator's egg, yeah. And at first she's like, I should protect them to thing, and then actually it's like... almost as if you should be alone, which I think somewhat relates, kind of a little bit skip ahead, but to her situation with her own pregnancy. She talks about, it's almost like, I should protect your baby. We can help her, and actually she's like, but I have the power to destroy you.
Yeah, I don't want to.
I don't want to. You should just be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a little bit, and what I like about that is also the idea that some people might question like, the one in X, is that still the same gate? Is it the same one?
Yeah.
Or should that be dead by now? So there's a little part of you thinking, is this a setup for what will be that gator we find in X? And it's like, straight away, it's like, no.
Nah, fuck it.
Destroy. It's the fact she goes down and then goes back up.
And just crushes it,
I don't want that. I don't need all of this. I can destroy all of you animals, a cow, whatever I want to do. Like, fuck you.
Yeah. Because
I am in control now. I'm the leader of this household now, and no one else is here. So I am finally in control.
And then she gives into it where she throws her mother, all burnt and messed up, down the basement. She just leaves her dad, and she goes and has sex with the projectionist.
Yeah.
And then that's where, when they go back, she, drives him back home. And I love that she sees like a soldier heading home.
Wait, does she have sex? She kisses him, doesn't she? She doesn't have sex with him.
She has sex with him.
Does she?
Yeah, he pipes.
I'm forgetting that part. I thought that they think, and that's why she led him back to the farm, because then they were going to have sex at the farm. I thought she kissed him in the projection booth.
She fucked him. But then they drive back, and they drive past that soldier, and she gets the prang of guilt of like, if I'd have waited one more night, Howard would be back.
Yeah.
But it's not Howard, and then as they
depression kind of. Yeah. Again, does something in her brain, and then it's the fact that then the rejection that she then gets.
And that's the first part where we see the rotted pig now.
Yeah.
The pig is now starting to rot and has kind of got all these maggots on it. and he's, her story's not making sense.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, we got a dog in the cellar, so we can't go into the house or something.
Because Dad's still alive at this point.
Dad's still alive, yeah.
But Mum is like,
And then
it's just a dog making all those noises down there.
It's just a dog, isn't it? Yeah.
And then because then they go. She shows him the cow in the barn and stuff like the cow that she liked in the barn. And so is that, and it's that little moment of he's like, oh yeah, and then he mentions about the dog, and she's like, we don't have a dog. It's like, you really forgot your life really quickly.
Yeah, like, straight off, and then he's like, oh fucking, she's a bit of a nutter, mate.
Yeah, I was like, I better, and he's like, I better go.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, I've got to go now. I've got to get back to the next showing, and yeah. We know as a character she does not take rejection.
No,
but I really this bit was really cool because I remembered most of what happened to most people, but I forgot what happened to him.
Okay.
So watching this again, I was quite like, oh yeah, shit, that's cool. He gets into the car and we see her on one side. We see her pick up the pitchfork, but then we don't see her again. And then in the background, we can see from the side of the barn, and she's not there anymore. Yeah. As he starts the engine, it looks like he's just about away, and then just bang, straight into his chest.
Yeah, so brutal, man.
Yeah,
just pitchforks in the chest, and then he tries to drive
bleeding
off.
And blood, and then he out the car, and she then finishes him off again.
Oh, so brutal. Yeah, she sticks it through and then stamps on it.
Yeah, it's such a brutal part.
It made me wince so much, man. I was just like, because I was thinking, when's this pitchfork coming into play, man? I know it's happening, and I thought, okay, a stab in the chest is pretty horrid, but it's when he's like on the floor. And she just puts it through the mouth, and then it's the stomp which gets me, man. And it's violent. It's so well done.
Yeah, because obviously we have the pitchfork death in X.
Yeah, through the eyes.
Yeah, through the eyes. So she has a tendency, because in that one she'd even made 3 holes, as if she'd made it purposefully for that reason, that I'm going to off someone through the holes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a cool use. I like a pitchfork. It's not a very common. Like,
no,
it's not often.
Which is a shame. More people should be pitchforked.
Yeah, remember, that's how the hog would like to die.
Yeah, that's how I'm going to die.
You have
pitchfork. Pitchfork, mate.
Yeah, and in some cases it's a little bit quicker, but not for him, because he's already been bleeding out and dying before she then finishes him off with that. It is also because, although having some questionable, maybe for the time, choices of like what he likes, he's quite open and honest about it, and he himself has plans for the future. He has a clear plan, and she sees that as him leaving her behind again. Yeah. So she thinks he could be a way out, and then he's not, because he thinks, fucking hell, you're weird. Yeah. But so it's taking that away and taking his future away, and I, like the fact that it's an interesting part. But when a character makes it clear about like his plans and his future, and he's got a passion that you kind of do get in his few scenes, it again feels more tragic. And then obviously with the whole. We have the whole the car being put into the which is also
which you see in X.
You don't see that exact car. You see a different car in X. So it's like a beetle. You see, because it's obviously, which just shows that it's been several other characters. Because you can see a beetle and you can see what looks like something else underneath it. So how many are in that lake?
Exactly.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a nice little nod across of that's what they do to get rid of all of the bodies when Poe goes off on a rampage. Because as we know in X, Howard is basically. Like a mother, Howard is that role. Howard becomes that role only because we don't get that clear represent. We get that in X, but Howard is only in this for one shot at the very end, and we don't get the whole we don't get the building of the relationship. We don't get any of that stuff. We just get. So we only know from X really that he is the one that he becomes like the mother character again, like his partner, but he's there. He is the one trying to keep her in check, but every once in a while he can't do it.
Yeah, he just has to clean up after her.
Yeah, if anyone comes, then he's got no choice. But there's also a little bit more sinister in X because it's a bit unclear whether he has people or they try to make money and bring people, or whether he's bringing people to keep her at bay from going outside of that. It's hard to know whether she's getting people are coming.
Yeah.
And because he said about making money and stuff like that in X, about the house and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to be is he trying to make money but she keeps offing people that come?
Yeah.
Or is it the case of he's trying to bring people because he knows she has a bloodlust and he wants to help her with that bloodlust?
And how much does he know? Because he says, you come in here and seducing my wife.
Yeah.
And it's how much is Howard a victim in this.
Yeah.
How much has what web has she spun to Howard?
Yeah, that's right. It's hard. I don't think. I think he's fully aware of what she's capable, and the end of this film helps us know that he's fully aware of what she is. Yeah. But yeah, even in X, although I think it's hard to know how much. Well, they have a person in the basement, so he knows what's going on because there's a person tied up in the basement. So he's definitely fully on board with it. I don't think. I still don't believe that he fully knows how much or what extent she actually sometimes goes to.
Maybe not. No.
But it's a hard one to say. But yeah. That first death is really good, and I think that's what's nice in this film is that yes, we have some little murders, little kind of acting out points. Yeah. But that's mainly animal based. But we have this kind of slow build to this breakdown. And then when the breakdown comes, this is when we get like several deaths in a row, and it all kind of nicely builds. It's quite a small, contained story. Yeah, they're not telling a big story. No, it is a small, and it all is just taking place over this very small period of time. You know, there could have been a chance someone else might have, and again, if they'd had more time, maybe they would have considered whether, do we tell it spanning over a little bit longer, or do we show her how her and Howard came, which might have needed slightly more to it. So I like the fact that they've chosen this very contained, small period of her life, which is the main breaking point in her life, the main destruction, obviously. Because then, in order to break away from this, now that she's done that even bigger act, murdering a person, which we have no idea if she's ever done that before, if she's murdered, she's done that to her mother, but she didn't fully off her mother, she just leaves her to die. Whether she's actually acted out and killed someone before is not completely clear. It seems like this may be the first actual murder. But now that she's done it, she's somewhat released. We see her get into her mother's beautiful red dress.
And she kills Daddy. She
kills Daddy, and the bird gets killed as well, doesn't it? Yeah. She offs the bird. She does that in front of Dad, and then she suffocates the bird, then suffocates Dad, which is quite a hard scene to watch, I think.
Yeah, well, because her dad is watches her take the pillowcase off and stuff like that. And she's like, "Sorry, Daddy," and it's
especially later when we have a kind of somewhat regretting the choice, like she was in a haze of I need to get rid of everything. I need to start. It's like in some kind of haze of I need to clear out my house. Yeah, I need to get I need spring cleaning. You get in that mood and you clear all that stuff, and it's like a week later, you're like, why did I get rid of some of that stuff? I don't know why I don't know why. What was it? That person, there was one of those Netflix things about bringing you joy, to clear out your stuff to
does this bring you joy?
I just think of all the people that literally cleared out most of their complete house and then go, that didn't bring me joy.
That didn't bring me joy. Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of pissed off that I'm going to rebuy stuff.
She kills her dad. Does it bring you joy?
Not really. I thought it would at the time, but it didn't. Yeah. And and that's in that monologue later, it does really nicely build to that. But the next thing is just the complete.
It's the dance, isn't it?
Just the complete you feel awkward and you feel sad for her, but you also feel kind of it's kind of cringe-worthy. It's like a good old bit of it's like British comedies when they go into the cringe factor, like watching The Office when it gets really cringy. Yeah, and you're I'm watching this, but or Peep Show, those scenes where you're it's in that case it's funny, but it's also I almost don't want to watch this because this is so cringeworthy. This is, you've acted in such, it's like David Brent doing the dance or something like that, and you're just and this is her. She's because she so believes that she's gonna she believes she's gonna get it. She's like, I have to get this too. Mitzi. She's like, it doesn't matter. She's like, well, I hope you do it. And she's like, I have to get away from this life. I deserve a better life than this.
And then as she, as she does the dance, which is really well done, where she, she imagines she's on the front line and she's got the people with her doing it, and it's all this fantasy that she's doing with fireworks behind her and stuff like that. And you see the audience, but then you also see her dad, her mum, who's supposed to be Howard, and the projectionist. And it's this thing of she's severed pretty much every tie in her life for this. Yeah. And then they're just nah, It was alright.
You're
not blonde or all American enough.
Yeah,
you know.
They wanted a certain kind, which again seems almost cruel.
Yeah,
because it's like you literally say what you wanted. So why did you let anyone but them audition?
Exactly. You know.
And you feel sorry for her because it's like you didn't really, and then obviously it gets to the point of really uncomfortable because she just can't let it go, and she's screaming and she's crying, and she's like a child having a tantrum, and she's literally there like, I need, please, like she's begging them. And it just gets awkward and awkward, and Ty West lets it long out. He's like no, you keep
he lets
suffering.
It hang, doesn't he?
He's like, we could just stop, or we could have the lady take her off, but then the lady comes to try and do it, and she still can't do it, and she can't get her off the stage, and she just lets it go until it cuts to her like sat outside.
Yeah.
And then Mitzi comes out to kind of...
And they just describe Mitzi. We need somebody blonde, pretty, and all-American,
It literally is, and you know what Pearl will be thinking in her head, that's exactly... Oh, I know that person.
Yeah.
And you know who's going to get hired for it. And then the scene, obviously, then they go... This is when they're back to the house.
Yeah.
And this scene, I think, this whole monologue scene... When they're inside the house, is both suspenseful, and Mia Goth is fucking incredible in this scene.
This is nuts.
They have thought through this monologue really carefully, and the most interesting part is I think a lot of it is like quite a lot of pressure that you kind of think when you like from perspective of like our wives or things like that. The pressure that sometimes gets put onto women.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And things like that, and you can see the way that Mia Goth I think has really influenced on this scene and really thought carefully from the perspective of what it's like for like these expectations that are like built up in your brain, and it's a very true to like, it's not that like a very, no matter what time period you were talking in, it's a very true, I think, a lot of the stuff, but you do really start to feel sorry for her, how unclear her brain is, like how she just can't seem to get things in her head right, like she can't seem to see it from any reality, but the reality is shocking underneath of it, and she just can't she can't escape what it wants, so she's trying to come to terms with the fact that her dream is not real, like it can't become real, and this is almost the point when she starts to actually go back into reality from her little days that she's created in the last few days, and she starts to regret about like her father, and maybe she shouldn't have done that to her mother, and what she does to animals.
Projectionist, but she says like she's like she enjoys it.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it, and
really enjoy it. It's like, and then it's like an aftermath of sometimes after I regret it kind of thing. But I do really enjoy it, and I want to. And that's all fantastic. But what makes it better is the fact you've then just got Mitzi on the other side of the table. Like, what the fuck would you do? Yeah, and you're also like, Mitzi, you're the one that brought her back. You've put yourself in this situation, and the whole time. What even makes it better is the suspense of in your head going, you should have got the fuck out of here.
Yeah, you should have got the fuck out.
You need to leave. Like, you need to go, and you need to go quickly, and it's just like... And
she's saying...
There's no good way this ends.
No. Pearl's saying some real home truths as well, like, when she's saying that Howard is... Like, she basically, like, manipulated Howard because she knew that Howard was her way out, you know, so she pretended to be somebody completely different, and that Howard lived a life out of the films. He had money, he could do whatever he wanted, and he wanted to get away from that, so he worked on the farm. And then she's like, we went to visit your family, and they lived an amazing life, and they were wealthy, and I wanted to stay there, but you were like, no, I don't want to. I want to live on the farm. So we came back to the farm, and then he goes and fights in the war, and she's stuck there, and it's just like it's a really sympathetic kind of at moments speech, because she's talking about like all of her life has just been controlled by other people. It's been determined by other people.
Sounds like she had a little say in like these choices, and it was all like, even though she thought he was the escape, it's also he ended up trying to turn it around on her, and actually like she thought that someone in that position would want a nice life, and actually they want more of a simple life, and it's that kind of opposite around, which is partially, and obviously he's gone off to the war, and she's like, I hate him for that, and she even talks about what sounds like a miscarriage but is not so unclear that it could be interpreted in other ways, about a baby, and there's like several ways. I think one is like, at first made it sound almost like she said it in order to get him
Yeah.
to be stuck with her, so that she could have him. But then in another way makes it sound like she had a miscarriage and that she couldn't even control that, and she lost that, and that was even less control in her life and affect that, which is the main way I took it. But there is also the darker way of which they had it but she didn't want it, so she did something kind of thing. Like there's also that kind of aspect of it, as if she took its life kind of thing. She had it but took its life. So it's kind of generally dark, and it's just that little bit level of some of it being just unclear enough that you're a bit like, how much can you truly believe some of parts of it? But you understand that what she's feeling is real, but some of it is a bit like scattered, like it's not quite.
What's the manipulation? Because then she also kind of says like, she do people like Howard ever feel the way that she does? She says, her mum and the projectionist, because she wanted them to know what it was like to suffer. And then she kind of goes on to almost like bargain and be like, I can forgive you for going off to war and leaving me, if you can forgive me for what I've done, and I can try and make the farm a home, and I can try and make it like the home that you've always wanted, so that we can live here and we can be happy. You just can't leave me on my own, because I can't bear to do it. And I think it's like a 7 or 8 minute monologue, and it's incredible. You're just watching, and then when Mitzi's like, I'm gonna go now. You're like, oh, thank God she's gone. And then Pearl's like, you got the part, didn't you? You can say it. And Mitzi's trying to be coy and be like, no, I didn't. And then she says, sister-in-law's got to stick together. Yeah. And Mitzi's like, yeah, I got it. And as soon as she say that, Pearl just switches again. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, fuck.
Because she says about like, do you think I'm strange and weird? Like, do you think I'm? And she's trying to justify it. You're thinking like, well, yeah. Yeah. Mitzi's like, you're fucking insane. I'm trying to get out of it. Yeah. But yeah, you just know, and it's that. Then there's that like still but kind of tracking shot as Mitzi is like trying to get out, and at first she's not there, and you just see Pearl just so like chill,
nonchalant,
like walks out of the door just like that, and then you just see her just like swinging her arms, and then she just as doing like picks up the axe as it's going, and just slowly like gaining, and then it has a somewhat classic horror trope of the girl falls over,
and Pearl's doing like the 1940s walk with the axe, really exaggerated,
And it's just that, and she just starts to catch her, like several whacks into her back as she like catches her. She keeps running, catches her again until she seems to get a fatal one in like spine. Yeah, and she just drops to the ground, and then it's brutal in the way she like is screaming and pleading, and you can see the pooling blood like getting bigger and bigger around her. It's just it's so sad, because it's like the thing is that. The other thing about Mitzi is that Mitzi as a character never actually really, she never tries to, like, she just is who she is. Yeah. She's not, she isn't like, you see that character and you think, oh, it's not, and it's not even like in X, like sometimes, like she was quite a clever character, Brittany Snow's character, she was better than what she is, but she could sometimes be a little bit like towards like church mouse, general. Yeah. She could be a little bit like just a bit off at times, to a point where you could be like, maybe you could see how someone would dislike her, but Mitzi doesn't actually try. She doesn't try to underdo. She's actually trying to be very supportive of Pearl. She's not really like
until the end. She's
not trying to do anything harmful. She seemed like a genuinely nice person that just happened to be in privilege. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like that's it, and that's what Pearl wants. And so you do feel really sorry for the situation, and then all of the like the stuff that you get to see after. Like even it's really hard watching the bit when she gets like. She's dead, but she's axing her butt apart, and she takes her to that again. So a link to like what happens with Brittany.
Feeds it to the crocodile.
Feeds it to the crocodile, and she's like clearing out and laying the table, and then as we get shots of Howard starting to like actually is returning, which at first like because it seems all like in a daze, you're like, is that actually happening, or is it like her brain going like this is happening? And she like lays out the whole of the table with the rotten pig and the dead parents.
Well, before that, I think after she's killed Mitzi, she goes downstairs and she hugs her dead mum, and she's like, maybe maybe you're right, Mum, and maybe I should make the best of what I've got.
Yeah.
You know? And then the mum hugs her, but you know that she's just fucking rotted and dead.
Yeah. And her brain, but that's what I mean. Her brain is broken at this point.
Yeah.
And that's why we get a kind of, again, Texas Chainsaw weird dead
That's the
meal.
start of the vibes.
Not quite sat round the table, and then all we get is Howard as him walking in, and then it's being like, the fuck is happening? Like, he sees outside, he sees some weird signs, but once he gets inside, he's like, what the fuck is this? And then we get this, what is it, like 4 or 5 minute long, just
when he sees
shot.
He sees like the table set, like Pearl has tried to make this happy home and family.
Yeah.
You've got the table set with the rotting, like the proper bogging rotten pig. You've got the dad in the wheelchair who's obviously dead. The mother propped up who's like all rotten and burnt.
But that's why,
charred.
From her perspective, it seems as though she's trying to make the perfect thing, and in her head, it's like it's broken, as if maybe they're not gone. Maybe to her, they're still there.
She can rescue this.
Yeah, she can make this better. This is the best I can do for a perfect family. You know, you're coming home to the perfect family. Yeah. And it's like, oh God, and then just the look on his face and the madness in hers.
And she's just staring, like crying, and it's
fucking... It's really, it's like a, I think again it's like trying to go for an old school, like when it kind of would hold on a shot for like quite a long time.
Yeah.
But this takes it to an extreme
where
it goes on, it goes long and possibly a tiny bit long, where you can see that Mia Goth's even struggling to keep this up anymore, because it starts to bend beyond the reality. But I think that's the point. It's meant to be a surrealist scene. And it is, but it's just the fact you can see it's in real time, and Mia Goth is trying to keep her eyes wide open, and her eyes are like literally crying from like the thing coming out, and the smile keeps like shifting, and she's struggling, like she's struggling to keep the muscles.
Painful, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's brutal, but it's a really like effective kind of just like, fucking hell, she's gone. She's gone.
She's nuts, man.
She is insane.
She's lost it.
So it is really effective in that way, and I think this film really well, lots of people have tried to do these kind of, how do people become serial killers, how do they become murderers, and I really love the like the 40s 50s kind of technical aspect, kind of the idea of making this feel like one of those old thing, even with dance sequences like Fred Astaire kind of like dance, singing in the rain kind of like dance sequence, mixed in with this, all of these kind of the fantasy world that she's created. And I think that's really effective, and it is him taking another thing, like taking the porn industry and using that as a way to stylize slasher. Made a really fantastic slasher, and this is a really good, I think, character piece of it. And I think it really adds to X, while also standing on itself as it's really strong, which is totally held together by Mia Goth. And I do think this could have been easily, without the perspective that they've put into it, and without her performance kind of bringing it, this could have easily kind of fallen into like a bit of a dull fine parrot, but she, I think, really elevates this. Really makes it stronger. I think it's excellent. So the question last time was, which one do you think is better? And I think that I found that an impossible kind of question to answer, because I think they're just two different films.
They are. It's very hard to pick one because they are so different. I think I would probably lean more, if I just wanted to re-watch one, I'd probably lean more towards X.
I think that's more because it is more in the vein of a classic slasher. It's a bit more of a fun film in that way, because this is a bit of a harder watch and a bit more like watching a drama
definitely
than it is, whereas the other one is a classic kind of, the same way we like to rewatch Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the same way I'd like to rewatch X, whereas this one is a bit more like watching a slightly more, this is more what you'd put in the elevated somewhat kind of horror category of like, it's trying to be be a drama while also being horrific, that kind of meld.
I'd put it in the category of like, it's like The Shining, where it's very slow and it builds to terror and very disturbing stuff, but it's not something that I'm going to be just put on and just have an easy watch. But if I'm in a very distinct mood, then the film will hit. If I want to watch something slower paced, but that I can I can really get into and just enjoy every minor detail, then I would be like, I'm happy to just stick Pearl on. But if I was like, I've had a long day at work, I just want to put something on that's more easy to watch and I can just watch mainly in the background, then I'm going to have X
is the one to go, yeah.
Kind of flipping over to the social media lounge. So obviously we put up what films we were watching on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Very mixed reviews so far. So we've got Neil from We Needed Roads podcast, our friend, who said, I think we said it was more like an even more fucked up Wizard of Oz crossed with Psycho. A career best for Goth so far. Bob Scott said, found it disappointing, to be honest. Had been really looking forward to it, but it turned into a one and done for me. Marginally better than X, though. I turned that off halfway through. Interesting.
That's very. I feel like you should watch the rest of X, because I feel like halfway through is a really odd
Same.
That film turns like
you got to stick with X.
And I'm guessing the weird thing is the first half of that is so you didn't like porn.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris loves horror. I personally prefer Pearl over X, and it isn't even close. Mia does a great job at painting a picture of an unhinged soul seeking that missing piece in life. There are multiple points where I think / feel, okay, she's no longer Mia Goth and is really just Pearl right now. And So Wizard podcast said, I've never wanted to be a scarecrow more in my life.
Love it.
Yeah, but no, I thought it was a banging film, and I'm really glad that we covered it. And it's got me even more excited for Maxine. You know?
Yeah, I'm very excited and hoping that what will basically be a trilogy.
Yeah.
That Ty West can pull off without it going anything too far over, or like it feeling any retread, or just feeling like it just isn't quite as good a quality as the other two.
Yeah,
it's not that X as well was the perfect film. There were some things that people would be like, oh, it falls a bit into the slasher kind of once it gets into it, but that was kind of what I thought was good about it. But some people would see that in the wrong way. But Maxine, again, it's just, the thing is, right now, we have no idea. It doesn't even have a proper release date yet.
No.
So we don't know what way they're going with it. We don't even know, apart from it following that character, we don't know what kind of genre he's going after. Like, each one of these were different. Is he going back to more of the slasher, or is it going in a completely different, for all we fucking know, there could be some kind of weird-ass supernatural where he delves into bloody the mirror image of Pearl and X, and why are they this way, and that there's a certain thing.
I'm not expecting that.
I really hope not. But I'm just saying, like, he could have delved off into a possession, or if he could go in any, because he's done all of these kind of films before. I mean, I hope that's not the case. I really hope that there's not too much thought about into the whole Pearl and X, Pearl and Maxine being a mirror image. I hope that's just more left as a coincidental kind of moment, because I more just want to know about what happens to Maxine and how that breaks apart, and whether that is a problem, or does she become a killer like we've said.
I mean, I've heard that Ty West is looking at going very giallo / video nasty with Maxine. That's what I've heard. So I'm expecting some kind of influence from European horror. I'm expecting it to be quite seedy. And I am expecting Maxine to be and dong. I'm expecting some dong.
Yeah.
It's got Kevin Bacon in it, so we might get some bacon dong.
Oh yeah, it's got
some bacon bits.
It's got a good cast on it. I that's what I just mean. I like the other two were made so close together and seemed to be made in a very kind of little pocket of like where he maybe wasn't. Like, although he's made lots of films, it's not like he's a huge director.
No,
as in he's not like he hasn't made like films that have made loads of money or anything like that. So he was still in that pocket. Whereas this one's been given extra time and been given a little bit extra, and more people are interested. Yeah. So it's just one of those where you really hope it doesn't get bigger and lose some of that smaller charm that I think X and Pearl had. Like, that kind of concept, blowing it up might make it worse.
Well, I mean,
but let's hope not.
Yeah, I've just read something that says Maxine first reactions called Pearl sequel, a gory homage to Dario Argento.
But again, that's what I mean about the supernatural thing, because there's no like way, you don't know, like that.
You
that
never
does
know.
have weird kind of moments that don't have any explanation and things like that.
So I guess we're just gonna have to see. I mean, we'll cover it.
I mean, the two styles that he has, he that kind of what I'm going to put is very much Texas Chainsaw in many ways, and then kind of that kind of like 50s styling that he's done, like that like golden age cinema style he's done here, and he's nailed both of them within a horror aspect. So I like the fact that he's taking different areas, and kind of bringing it in to kind of reinvent something. So let's hope that he can reinvent Dario. Let's Giallo. Okay, awesome.
Well, I mean, as always, please remember to hit us with a subscribe. I don't know why I messed that up straight away. And come and let us know what your thoughts on Pearl. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Please remember to hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. And we will see you next week. Take care and goodbye.